Hello, America, and hello, nuclear aficionados around the world. Welcome to Nuclear.com Daily. This is Friday, December 20th, 2013, and it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas here in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. My new base of operations. I've enjoyed for many years talking with you and working out of my home office, a few subway stops north of NRC headquarters in Rockville, Maryland. But the time has come. Long ago, my young bride and I decided that when the time came to retire, we'd move down to Myrtle Beach area, and that's what we've done. Anyway, she's retired, not me, and actually, Professor Schulin, she hadn't really retired. She's added on 2 new teaching jobs. But she's doing it like I was, out of home instead of going in to school every day. God bless you. Dr. Kathleen Schulin, my dear wife, without whom I probably wouldn't have continued in the nuclear field. Who knows what would have happened? Life is funny that way. Well, one of the things I've been doing down here in North Myrtle Beach is more systematic review of nuclear information in the press, as opposed to sticking with going through the government documents every day. I've hired my first employee. If you're ever down here in North Myrtle Beach, please feel welcome to stop by. My office is at Windy Hill Center in North Myrtle Beach, right next to the post office. It's under the name, not nuclear.com. I don't have that out on the front window. It's a new website. I wasn't planning on starting a new business here, but I ran for city council almost as soon as I moved in. Those of you who listen know that I'm sick and tired of not having a choice on the ballot who comes close to representing my views. And so even though I didn't know who the candidates were, I wanted to be sure that this time, in this election for city council, I'd be able to vote for somebody who came close to representing my views. Well, anyway, the first thing I did after filing as a candidate was look for an internet domain name to use for my campaign. And I was amazed that what I think is the best domain name for my city had not been registered yet. And that's, North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is the name of the city. Our city government's website is nmb.us. Well, there's a TLD, not .com or .org or .us, but there's a TLD for the Seychelles Islands that's .sc, and SC, South Carolina. Anyway, so I registered nmb.sc, and I think it'll make a go as a great standalone business, and my goal is to serve my new hometown, which is actually, I have deep family roots here. My great uncle actually used to own all this land that's Windy Hill. His name was Jeremiah Vereen, and George Washington, after he was elected president, came down on a tour of South Carolina, and the National Archives talks about the night that he spent here at Jeremiah Vereen's house during that tour. And local legend has it that my little section of the beach here, Windy Hill Beach, got its name by George Washington, a comment that he made. Allegedly, when his hat blew off, he said, "My, what a windy hill." And that's what we've been calling it ever since. Anyway, so please know that you are welcome, wanted, and encouraged to come visit here at Windy Hill Center. 9 to 5 are my normal office hours, but I'm often here early and staying late, but my office manager's here from 9 to 5. And one of the first things she does every day is go through the front pages of newspapers from around the world, harvesting those front pages and searching them for mention of the word nuclear. God bless her, and it really helps. So I'm going to start off the show today by going through front page news review. And actually, that may be all that we have time for during the show. Those of you listening in live via TalkShoe, thanks for being here. And those of you listening in later via podcast or watching the new YouTube video version of nuclear.com daily, please know that you are welcome to come join in live. This is not meant to be a monologue. You can join in just like a conference call. The phone number is 724-444-7444. You'll be asked for a call ID. That's 95348#. So come one, come all of goodwill to nuclear.com daily. Let us reason together. Well, I mentioned Christmas, and I want to start off with the front page of the Tri-City Herald out of the state of Washington. And there's a picture of Santa Claus there with a child whispering in his ear. And that Santa Claus happens to be the chief nuclear officer of Energy Northwest. God bless the employees there at Energy Northwest and Columbia Generating Station. The caption talks about how they've been serving local communities. More than 400 children in Benton and Franklin counties received gifts donated by the nuclear plant employees this week at 11 different parties. It's the 36th year that the employees have sponsored the program. And Brad Swazatsky, chief nuclear officer at the Richland plant, stood in as Santa. Heartwarming story. All right, more nuclear power in the news. The United Arab Emirates, they're building multiple unit facility. They've got subsidized by you, the United States taxpayers, with a loan through one of those international agencies. I forget if it was an IMF loan or Ex-Im Bank. That's what it was, the Export-Import Bank. And one of the conditions was that they had to use the proceeds. It was like a $2 billion loan. They had to use the proceeds of the loan to buy from U.S. manufacturers. They actually have a contract there in the United Arab Emirates with a South Korean firm to build it, but the South Korean firm is using Westinghouse technology, of course owned by Toshiba, but they're buying components here from the United States. So is that a good way to spend the tax dollars? Well, I don't know. We're spending money we don't have. But that's the background. Anyway, one of the newspapers there out of the United Arab Emirates, The National, has a front page story today on nuclear's major role in cutting carbon. Those of you who've listened to the show know that, heck, I'm pro-nuclear because I think it's the safest way of generating a lot of electricity. It's the environmental advantages of nuclear that attracted me decades ago to as a young college student to even consider working in the industry. And I did as a summer job during school there at Calvert Cliffs Nuclear Plant, and I continued that work after graduating. Heck, after taking my last final exam, I fondly recall having an prepaid airplane ticket going down to Arkansas Nuclear One for an outage that was going to begin. So less than 2 hours after taking my last exam, I'd already packed up my stuff and moved out of my dorm room, and I was on my way to an outage. The outage coordinator who came to pick me up at the airport said she'd never seen anybody come off the airplane in a suit and carrying a tennis racket. That's I couldn't pack those in, but that's the mood that I was in. Joe College, coming down to work at the nuclear plant. Oh, I loved Arkansas. I traveled all around the country, and every place I went, I enjoyed. my wife and I, when we got married, that was several years after I started traveling. Um, our honeymoon was heading back towards Palisades plant in Michigan during a snowstorm here on the East Coast. It was quite a great time. Anyway, I loved all those areas. She didn't care for the area around Salem plant in New Jersey too much. That was the last time she actually came out and stayed with me on a job. Oh my goodness! But that was about the time when she started working in what ended up being her professorial career. All right. Anyway, United Arab Emirates, the national front page story: nuclear's major role in cutting carbon. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, the environmental advantages of nuclear, I don't give a whit of credence to the carbon dioxide and climate alarmism. Um, I, I spent literally thousands of hours during during the early stages of the George W. Bush administration, delving deeper into the science journals and talking with climate scientists and experts in related fields. And I've been following climate since my college and high school days, as it relates to energy production. Of course, back then, the predominant climate-related aspect of energy production was global cooling, and anyway, I would read everything that was published in like the journal Science. That are related to climate. I subscribed to Science because it was a great. They had the best coverage of the radiation health science back then, and I'd also look at the other energy related stuff, and climate was part of that. Anyway, so I had a skeptical view of the global warming science. I was following. There were a couple of early websites. Patrick Michaels had one. He was the state climatologist for Virginia that I'd read. He'd update it every week or so, and so I kept abreast of his perspective. So I was coming in with being much better grounded in the skeptical second-hand analysis, and I thought to be fair, to be educated, to be informed, that I really needed to get acquainted with the scientific literature. And so I bought the IPCC reports that had come out. Two of them had come out by that time. And I subscribed to a bunch of the climate science journals so that I could access their back issues online. And I spent literally thousands of hours over the next 2 years working more than full time, getting acquainted with climate science. And my conclusion after doing that was that there's an awful lot of exaggeration and other lies being portrayed as fact when it comes to climate science. And those people who tell you that the science is settled, that there's no doubt that if we don't drastically reduce our carbon dioxide emissions, we are in for anthropogenic climate change. I think that they're selling you shoddy science as if it were first rate, and it most definitely is not. I have nothing but contempt for folks like University of Pennsylvania or Penn State University professor Michael Mann. I have very mixed feelings. I have a little bit. I do think he does some things right. James Hansen, but he's drunk the Kool-Aid. He is not an objective scientist. He is an advocate. And even though I was heartened to see his analysis of nuclear power's effects, the health effects, and his net analysis, which did not include climate change or CO2 environmental advantages. He said nuclear power has saved over 1 billion lives, and possibly, I think, 1.6 billion was his estimate over recent decades, just because of air pollution emitted. Was that billion or million? Doggone it. I'm getting to the stage where I forget more than I remember. I bet it was million. It saved over 1 million lives. Anyway, I agree. His back of the envelope kind of calculations on this are spot on, and it jives with everything except the really alarmist branch of the low-level radiation crowd. Dr. Helen Caldicott, a physician, who I have no doubt has good motives, and she came up during the age of Alice Stewart, and her excellent research on the effects of exposing the unborn child to radiation, high levels of radiation. But I think that she's lost sight of the science. They make excuses now for why the data does not show what they claim ought to be obvious. I mean, there's estimates still out there that Fukushima will cause 1 billion deaths. Chernobyl will cause 1 billion deaths. Incredibly outrageous statements that are repeated as fact. And I do mean billion, not million. I remember that one quite well. Sister Rosalie Bertel was the first one to break the billion mark in her estimates. All right. Anyway, great article, except for the fact that it empowers the CO2 alarmists. On the front page there of their website, the national newspaper there out of the United Arab Emirates highlights that nuclear energy's benefits are becoming more obvious, says United Arab Emirates. As global concerns over climate change increase, nuclear power is increasingly being considered one of the best sources of alternative energy. And they have it took 2 pages to print, article about this. Nuclear already provides a big percentage of electricity around the world, and eventually it'll have to be replaced, because these were plants that were built in the 1980s, and climate change is one of the primary driving factors for countries around the world to invest in nuclear, and that's why a lot of them will sustain and develop existing and new nuclear programs. The uniqueness of the nuclear technology requires adequate safety and security measures are in place, and therefore any expansion in nuclear energy should ensure such measures, is a quote from Mr. Al-Kabi of the United Arab Emirates. Let's see, who is he? He is the UAE's ambassador to the IAEA. So don't empower the alarmists, but do listen to the folks who tell you that nuclear does require a certain safety culture, a certain uniqueness in approach to be successful. I don't think I worry about China becoming such a large nuclear power plant location, because I don't see how it's possible for them to have the safety culture within their nuclear industry that is, I've come to conclude, essential to the safe operation of nuclear plants. In China, they they harvest organs from political prisoners, hundreds of thousands of these Falun Gong practitioners. China even advertises how healthy their organ donors are. Organ donors, that's a euphemism when you're talking about political prisoners who are matched and typed and tested so that when you call them up and say, I need a lung transplant, or I need a cornea transplant, or I need a heart transplant, in most places you get put in a registry, and when there's an automobile accident or something with someone who's matched, who gets matched with your body, then they say, hurry up, we got a heart for you. But in China they say, oh yeah, we can fix you up, here, come, and they schedule the date for you weeks in advance, months in advance. And when you come, they execute the prisoner, harvest the organs. Not necessarily in that order, I've heard. This is not the kind of a place that is conducive to the self-critical attitude necessary for a safe nuclear power industry. Anyway, so I'm praying that we don't have a disaster out of China, and I'm urging my colleagues in the nuclear industry to stop empowering China in their drive to nuclear. Don't be the fool thinking that you can cause them to change their culture there in China. Go ahead and write articles talking about how important safety culture is, and resolve not to help places that don't encourage that culture. And the nuclear industry's safety culture is incompatible with the Chinese repressive, overtly repressive governmental system. That's my conclusion. China, I know you're active in suing people and controlling people who say things that aren't nice about you. Well, I'm sorry that the stakes are too high. My name is Steve Schulin, Schulin. I'm at 4007 Highway 17 South in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 29582. I hope you change. All right, next, small modular reactors in the news in Missouri. On the top front page of the Rolla Daily News today, small modular reactors offer exciting opportunity for Missouri. You know, Westinghouse was one of the applicants for this second DOE grant. Westinghouse did not make the final cut. When it came to the DOE deciding who to support, the DOE chose NuScale, a small modular reactor design to back. That's out of the Oregon State University Nuclear Engineering Department. $452 million. But Westinghouse sees the tremendous market potential for small modular reactors, and it would help to get $452 million. But I'm sure they're gonna continue on their design work without it. Holtec, another applicant, and actually they were my personal favorites because they put a guarantee in their grant application proposal. They said, if we get the grant and we are unsuccessful in getting our small modular reactor licensed through the NRC, then we will refund every penny of the grant to the taxpayers. I I like that as a marketing guy. Anyway, here in the Missouri front page, they had a picture from the Rolla, that's the town there in Missouri, the Rolla Regional Economic Commission, on their meeting, a question and answer session on Tuesday. Anyway, but it was nuclear that made the headline, and it's written by Rolla Daily News reporter Eddie O'Neill. They don't have the full text of the article there at their website yet, but it is there on the front page, and they just start talking about nuclear down at the end of the article. One of those prospects, they're talking about the regional prospects for economic development, that is in the works is the creation of a small modular reactor, which has been described as the new generation of nuclear power plant designs being developed in several countries. The reactors provide a flexible, cost-effective energy alternative. They also have an interesting looking article down there at the bottom of the front page. Heavy internet use shares symptoms of addiction. And heck, I'm here in front of my computer using the internet many hours a day. I'm probably considered a heavy internet user, but am I addicted? God, I don't think so. Oh gosh, if I was reading books, hard copy books like I did as a child, which was probably about the same amount of time during the day, maybe a little bit less. Was I addicted to books? Well, I have a love of learning, a love of knowledge. All right, moving on to Fukushima news. Japan Times has several stories related on the front page. There's a little teaser up there at the top. You see the chef's hats and the kid. That's about French chefs giving gourmet meals to Fukushima refugee people. A story down below the fold about Prime Minister Abe's wife, who has been quite critical of his pro-nuclear approach. And then a story about a scandal, money scandal, that is related to Fukushima. It's not nuclear directly, but there was TEPCO owned a lot of businesses that weren't related to energy. One of them was a hospital, and when their cash crunch occurred after the Fukushima disaster, one of the things they did was sell off many of these assets. And one of them involved a hospital, and the financing related to the sale of that hospital is apparently having political fallout. Nuclear weapons in the news. A couple of stories. One out of the state of Wyoming, the Laramie boomerang. Let's see. This is down at the bottom of the front page. Air Force commander seeks to restore confidence in missile force. Major General Jack Weinstein, officially named leader of the Cheyenne-based 20th Air Force. And I didn't see the full text of this at the paper's website, but you can see the front page at newseum.org today. That's Wyoming. I use the listing of the front pages sorted by state. So go to Wyoming, and they list them by the city in alphabetical order. Look for Laramie, and the Boomerang is the name of the paper. Another nuclear weapons front page story, and this one did make the paper's website, is out of Arizona, the Arizona Republic. A relic of the Cold War is laid to rest in Arizona. It's a story about a B-52 the sweet Tracy, which was being dismantled as part of the terms of a treaty between the U.S. and Russia on having a limit on the number of nuclear-capable delivery vehicles, including B-52 bombers. The rest of the front page stories today that mention nuclear are about Iran, and there's an awful lot of them. The Arab Times out of Kuwait has their front page story: Tehran nuclear talks return to Geneva. I talked a little bit about that on yesterday's show, but they have a nice subhead on it: France casts doubt on final deal with Tehran. This is the first I've heard on the deal being anything but a done deal on the West side since France slowed up the works back before the deal was announced. Let's see, a story out of Idaho makes the top story of the Moscow Pullman Daily News. It's an AP story. New Iran sanctions pushed by 26 senators. Subhead: penalties would go into effect if Tehran violates the nuclear deal. So that's an interesting approach. Conditional sanctions. The same story is mentioned in the Pittsburgh Tribune Review and its sister paper, the Regional Tribune Review, and they title it "Senators Defy Obama in Bid to Back Israel." That's the same story. They want to compel U.S. to support a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear program. The same theme shows up in the Jerusalem Post's lead story. Defying the White House, senators submit new Iran sanctions bill. Press Secretary Carney says Obama would veto legislation that undermines U.S. diplomacy. Arkansas Democrat Gazette puts it on the front page with a picture of a concerned-looking pair of senators, Levin and let's see, what's that California lady's name? That's Boxer. Defense bill passes, heat called for on Iran. Did you happen to see Senator Coburn of Oklahoma yesterday on C-SPAN? He was talking about the other senators and said, I've been here for a long time, and I've come to the conclusion that what motivates these members of Congress and in the House and the Senate is not serving the people. It's not the public good. It's not even following their oath. What concerns them, the top thing on their list, is getting reelected, and that is what they base their actions on. It's fulfilling that goal. Breath of fresh air from Senator Coburn. Lebanon Daily Star, out of the nation of Lebanon, has a couple of nuclear articles. White House vows veto on proposed new Iran sanctions. And up closer to the top, a story about Syria. March 14th says ready to reach out to Tehran. March 14th is a coalition. It's Dateline Beirut by a Daily Star reporter, Hussein Dakrab. The March 14th coalition has signaled its readiness to reach out to Iran with the aim of seeking an end to military intervention by Tehran and Hezbollah in the war in Syria. March 14th, officials said Thursday. The planned March 14th openness towards Tehran comes nearly a month after Iran signed the historic interim accord on its nuclear program with the P5+1 group. The accord would curb Iran's nuclear ambitions in exchange for limited relief of sanctions that have been battering its oil-dependent economy. Former Prime Minister Farouk Syria, head of the Parliamentary Future Bloc, had paved the way for the March 14th move by sending 2 letters to Iranian President Rouhani, though he has not received any answer yet. Quote, "We will demand 2 things from Iran: a halt to Iran and Hezbollah's military intervention in the war in Syria, and Tehran's commitment to the rules of international legitimacy," future MP, Member of Parliament, Amar Hori told the Daily Star. Hori said the March 14th coalition would demand from Iran and Western powers that signed the nuclear deal their support for the return of Lebanese legitimacy, withdrawal of all illegitimate weapons, respect of Lebanon's independence and sovereignty, commitment to the Babda Declaration, and implementation of the UN Resolution 1701 that ended Israel's 34-day war on Lebanon in 2006. Both Hori and Lebanese Forces Member of Parliament Antoine Zabra ruled out the possibility of a visit by a March 14th delegation to Tehran, saying the planned outreach to Iran would be through letters to the Iranian government. Interesting developments. And finally, the Wall Street Journal emphasizes Obama threatens to veto fresh sanctions on Iran. And they also have a little blurb about it in their worldwide What's News column there on the left. So that's the front page review today. Thanks for joining in. Let's see if we got any questions or comments there. Yes, Capricious asks, are you aware of any research on the stabilization of waste radioisotopes? I have seen one research line on let's see, what's that word? The ancient alchemists were trying to change one material into another, like lead into gold. And our ability now to work at the atomic level to actually remove, like neutrons, adding neutrons or subtracting neutrons from individual isotopes. Transmutation, that's right. Thanks, Capricious. That's the word. I have seen work for some of the long-lived isotopes where they target actually changing, transmuting those long-lived isotopes into an entirely different isotope or even an entirely different element through the manipulation of neutrons. And I'm trying to remember which, it might have been carbon-14, but I might be wrong. There's a story there on, if not on the front page of nuclear.com right now, down towards the bottom. If you go to the very bottom of nuclear.com, it'll take you to previous highlights, and you might have to go through a couple of them, but it was right there on the front page not too long ago, and I kept it up actually for several years. It was such a great and interesting story on nuclear physics. So that it's Capricious characterizes this as basically accelerating the natural process. I don't know if they're actually doing it like a decay, accelerated decay, or if they're actually doing something different, different rather than decay. But the end result being stability, a stabilized dope would it's the same, but I think they're using different processes. It's not decay; it's neutron bombardment. I think is what they're doing. Very very interesting stuff. So that's one way of stabilizing it, and another. I don't know if this actually applies to stabilization or it's more like encapsulation. The vitrification, the glassification of waste out at Hanford, um, where they're still working on the design and construction of the vitrification facility. There's some concerns that there are areas deep in the bowels of that plant that the original design said, look, this is going to be so contaminated that we're better off just making it so that you can never get into these hot cells. There are no doors. There are no openings that stuff can leak out of. All right, so Capricia says, yeah, you wasn't asking about encapsulation. All right, so that's the only stabilization approach that I've been aware of over the years. There's an awful lot of inventive folks, and I'm afraid that since 9/11, I used to keep abreast of the nuclear physics, the theoretical journals where stuff like this was talked about. There was a fantastic library up there, right between Rockville and Gaithersburg, Maryland, by the National Institute of Science and Technology, NIST. But after 9/11, they closed it down. I used to go there every week. I'd spend an afternoon at this world-class journal library, freely open to the public. What a tremendous resource. But they do have a nuclear reactor there on the site, and so they just closed the campus down after 9/11. And I never was able to get access again to it, except as a registered visitor to certain events, and it wasn't the library that I had access to. It was other parts. What a shame! what a tragic loss to the community. I don't know how many other people availed themselves of those journals, but it was a wonderful, wonderful tool. Here today in the internet era, I'm all for some kind of a way to allow people to have free access to scientific work that's at least funded by government. I think every research paper that's produced by government-funded grants, and today virtually every paper is indeed funded, at least partially, through a federal government, U.S. federal government grant. I think these ought to be made freely available. All right. Thanks for joining in today, Capricious. Very much appreciate your being here. Hope you all have a great rest of the day, a fantastic weekend, and those of you in the nuclear biz, make it another safe one, my friends. This is Steve Schulin signing off for Nuclear.com Daily.